How did Katie Holmes leave Tom Cruise and Scientology?
I love the city. It's always a bit of an adjustment because in New York, no matter what, if someone's being nice to you or if they're being mean to you, they're yelling at you.
For years, the world saw Katie Holmes as the young starlet who captured Tom Cruise's heart, from Dawson's Creek to whirlwind Parisian engagements. But behind the glitz and glamour lay a life under constant surveillance, strict control, and extraordinary pressure. Her marriage to Cruise wasn't just a union of two Hollywood icons. It was a high-stakes intersection of fame, wealth, and one of the world's most secretive organizations, the Church of Scientology. Now, after years of silence, Katie Holmes has finally broken her silence on Tom Cruise and his Scientology. It's truly shocking. Let's get started. Origins of stardom. Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise. Katie Holmes started her journey into show business at the age of 14 when she signed up for a local modeling school in Toledo. In 1996, she attended the International Modeling and Talent Association competition in New York, a pivotal step that landed her representation with a talent agent. That same year, she filmed a simple audition tape in her basement, with her mother reading lines for her. This tape would catch the attention of director Ang Lee, who cast her as Libby Casey in 1997's The Ice Storm, alongside Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver. Holmes's debut was subtle, yet impactful. Her career skyrocketed shortly afterward when she auditioned for the television show Dawson's Creek. Unable to travel to Los Angeles due to a school play, she sent another basement-recorded tape, arriving during spring break in 1997. Producers were immediately convinced she was perfect for the role of Joey Potter. Dawson's Creek premiered in January 1998, and Holmes appeared in all 128 episodes until the series concluded in 2003. Her character became iconic, particularly her romance with Pacey Witter, which TV Guide later recognized among the best on-screen couples of the early 2000s. Holmes earned multiple Teen Choice Award nominations and graced 17 covers for Rolling Stone and TV Guide, cementing her status as a rising Hollywood star. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise's path was forged in entirely different circumstances. By age 14, he had attended 15 different schools, moving constantly between the United States and Canada, largely due to his father's sporadic work as an electrical engineer. Cruise struggled with dyslexia, making school a constant uphill battle. Initially drawn to the priesthood, he enrolled in St. Francis Seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio, at age 14, influenced by a local priest's guidance. However, that early path toward the priesthood came to an abrupt and dramatic halt when he and a friend were caught hiding and drinking stolen bottles of liquor. The school sent a formal notice to his family, effectively ending his time at St. Francis Seminary. With the dream of priesthood shattered, Cruise was sent back to conventional schooling, forced to confront a world far less structured and far more uncertain than the chapel walls that had once defined his days. This moment would mark a turning point, setting him on a trajectory that eventually led him from small-town classrooms to the heights of Hollywood stardom. Acting provided a new outlet. By 18, supported by his mother and stepfather, he dropped out of high school and moved to New York City in 1980, with no connections and little money, working as a busboy to sustain himself. Within a year, Cruise was signed by Creative Artists Agency, one of Hollywood's largest talent agencies. His first film role came in 1981's Endless Love, alongside Brooke Shields, followed by a more substantial part in Taps the same year. His breakout performance arrived in Risky Business, where the now iconic scene of him dancing in underwear made him a household name overnight.
And some iconic scenes. I mean, speaking about famous films, that scene in Risky Business, there you are in your socks.
Cruise solidified his status as an international star with Top Gun, the highest-grossing film of 1986, cementing his reputation for charisma and intensity on screen. Over the decades, he amassed a reported net worth of approximately $600 million, with his films earning over $12 billion worldwide. Holmes and Cruise were thus each defined by their meteoric rises. Their origins could not have been more different, yet their parallel ascents set the stage for a collision of worlds. The meeting and Hollywood courtship. In April 2005, Hollywood was already buzzing with rumors when Katie Holmes, then 26, was photographed alongside Tom Cruise, who was 42 at the time. Holmes had only recently ended a high-profile relationship with actor Chris Klein, her co-star from the American Pie series. The images, captured at a Los Angeles event, hinted at the beginnings of something far more serious than a casual meeting. For Holmes, who had spent years building her career on television with Dawson's Creek and on the big screen, this was a sudden and highly public step into the orbit of one of Hollywood's most powerful men. For Cruise, the timing aligned with a phase in his life defined by intense devotion to both career and Scientology. Within weeks, the pair were inseparable. Then came May 23, 2005. Cruise appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show to promote War of the Worlds, but the conversation quickly veered toward his new relationship. In a moment that would be described as both bizarre and exhilarating, Cruise leapt onto Oprah's couch, raised his fists in the air, and shouted about his love for Holmes. "I'm in love. I met her, and she's extraordinary," he declared.
I'm in love. Something I have to discuss with her personally, but she's listening.
The audience erupted, while Oprah herself appeared stunned by the raw intensity of his emotion. Clips of the couch-jumping moment circulated endlessly, shifting Cruise's public image overnight from controlled leading man to a man willing to publicly display unrestrained passion. Only 7 weeks after the relationship became public, Cruise took another dramatic step. On June 16, 2005, he proposed to Holmes at the Eiffel Tower in Paris.
At yet another press event for his movie, this time in Paris, he announced the couple was engaged.
Reports indicated that Cruise had planned the proposal earlier that morning, making the announcement to the press shortly afterward. Holmes, seated beside him at the iconic landmark, wore a large diamond ring, while Cruise described the day as magnificent and insisted it was the most romantic moment of his life. Even Dakota Fanning, Cruise's co-star on War of the Worlds, was present and later described the couple as the nicest people she had met, unaware that behind the public smiles, a complex web of religious influence and personal pressure was beginning to form. Holmes also converted to Scientology. Born and raised Catholic, Holmes's sudden embrace of the Church of Scientology puzzled friends, family, and the media. Sources reported that she began taking courses and auditing sessions almost immediately, stepping into a highly structured and closely monitored system. This placed her squarely in a network that scrutinized every personal and professional detail, intertwining her life ever more tightly with Cruise's devotion to the church and its enigmatic leader, David Miscavige. The speed and intensity of Holmes's courtship with Cruise were mirrored in the public's reaction. Entertainment outlets documented every dinner, premiere, and public appearance, speculating on the couple's compatibility, the impact of Scientology, and the whirlwind nature of their engagement. Just 3 months prior, Holmes had been engaged to Chris Klein. Now, she was stepping into one of the fastest-moving relationships Hollywood had seen, with a man whose fame, influence, and religious convictions loomed as large as his cinematic presence. What made this period particularly high stakes was the intersection of fame, faith, and power. Cruise, by 2005, was not merely a Hollywood superstar. He was a leading figure in Scientology. By the end of June 2005, just weeks after meeting, Holmes had not only become Cruise's fiancé, but also a publicly acknowledged member of Scientology, a figure enmeshed in a network that demanded loyalty, visibility, and compliance. The stakes were extraordinarily high. Holmes was still young, with a promising career, yet she was entering a system defined by surveillance, influence, and expectation, where every action could have personal, legal, and spiritual consequences. This was not merely a Hollywood romance. It was a collision of ambition, devotion, and secrecy. Marriage, Suri, and Scientology's influence. On November 18, 2006, Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise wed at the 15th-century Odescalchi Castle in Bracciano, Italy, a site with historical ties to the infamous Borgia family. The wedding was nothing short of a media spectacle. It stretched across 3 days, beginning with an intimate dinner at Cruise's favorite Roman restaurant on November 16th. The ceremony itself featured flag-bearers dressed in Renaissance attire and hundreds of candles meticulously placed in the castle's armory. Holmes wore an ivory silk gown designed by Giorgio Armani, while guests included some of the era's brightest celebrities. Jim Carrey, Jennifer Lopez, and David Beckham all attended. Andrea Bocelli performed at the reception, and the couple's 5-tier white chocolate cake dominated the media coverage. While to the public, it appeared a lavish celebration of love, insiders would later describe it as a highly orchestrated event, as much about the Church of Scientology as it was about the couple. Leah Remini, a former Scientologist, later referred to the wedding as a PR stunt designed to showcase the church's influence and the devotion of one of its most prominent members. Before the wedding, Holmes and Cruise had already welcomed their daughter, Suri, on April 18, 2006, at St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica. Suri weighed 7 pounds, 20 ounces at birth, and her arrival was closely guarded. Cruise reportedly purchased a sonogram machine to keep at home, raising questions from medical professionals and the public. The couple kept Suri out of the public eye for the first 6 months, allowing the child to acclimate away from media scrutiny. When she finally appeared on the October 2006 cover of Vanity Fair, the issue sold over 70,000 copies. Cruise revealed that the name Suri had been chosen before discovering the baby's gender, and that it meant red rose in Persian. Cruise's devotion to Scientology,
it's something that has helped me incredibly in my life.
Yeah.
And I've been a Scientologist for over 30 years, and so it's a beautiful religion.
which had begun in the mid-1980s when he dated actress Mimi Rogers, had by this point become a defining force in his personal and professional life. Rogers, a devoted Scientologist, introduced him to the religion, and though their marriage was brief, it cemented Cruise's interest. Over the following decades, his involvement deepened, in large part due to his close personal and strategic alliance with David Miscavige, the church's leader. Those within the organization described the bond as intense. Cruise and Miscavige reportedly played tennis together, smoked cigars, and even went skydiving, activities that reinforced both trust and loyalty. Miscavige attended Cruise's weddings, including his marriage to Nicole Kidman in 1990 and Holmes in 2006. Holmes's life, as insiders have revealed, was monitored with almost relentless precision. According to accounts from former high-ranking Scientology officials like Marty Rathbun, details about her day-to-day activities, where she went, whom she met, what she said, were routinely reported to Miscavige. Tom Cruise's own staff, including family members, were said to be more fearful of Miscavige than of Cruise himself. The couple's domestic and professional circles were under surveillance, a fact that Holmes reportedly became increasingly aware of during her marriage. She was closely involved in her daughter's upbringing, but even her movements and communications were subject to scrutiny. The combination of celebrity, wealth, and religious pressure created a high-stakes environment for Holmes. Scientology's secretive structures, including the Gold Base in Gilman Hot Springs, California, a sprawling 200-hectare complex used to train and house the church's most devoted members, served as both a symbol and a tool of control. Reports indicate that Cruise had considered sending Holmes to the compound. The stakes were further amplified by the church's methods of communication. Holmes's movements were so closely observed that when she eventually planned her departure, she relied on disposable burner phones to contact lawyers and allies. Despite these pressures, The relationship appeared to the public as a fairy tale romance, until it fell apart completely. But the troubling part does not end here. Troubling Scientology beliefs and messianic concepts. The Church of Scientology, founded by science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard in the early 1950s, presents itself as a religion centered on self-improvement and spiritual freedom. At its core, Scientology offers a system of auditing, courses, and hierarchical levels known as the operating thetan, or OT levels, designed to help adherents achieve higher spiritual awareness. Publicly, it emphasizes personal growth, success, and mental clarity. But its advanced texts, accessible only to dedicated members after years of study, contain far more extraordinary and controversial claims. Among these is the infamous Xenu narrative, introduced in the OT3 materials. According to these writings, Xenu was an intergalactic ruler who, 75 million years ago, transported billions of people to Earth, then known as TGAC, and killed them with hydrogen bombs. Their disembodied souls, or thetans, allegedly attached to living humans today, creating spiritual and psychological blocks that Scientology aims to clear. While this story is shrouded in secrecy and heavily protected by the Church, former members have described it as a central cosmological explanation for human suffering. Some adherents of Scientology also discuss the concept of messianic or cosmic figures, beings who possess extraordinary power and may play decisive roles in spiritual conflicts that could challenge divine or Christian authority. These discussions, though rarely publicly confirmed, appear in advanced doctrinal texts and oral teachings shared only with highly committed members. Certain followers describe a galactic overlord scenario in which these figures assert influence over the universe and humanity's spiritual fate. While the Church frames these ideas as symbolic or metaphysical, critics argue that they cultivate a mindset of allegiance to the organization over outside authorities, blending mythology with organizational loyalty. These teachings are tightly controlled, often revealed only to members after years of progression through the Church's courses and auditing sessions, creating a hierarchy of knowledge and influence that fosters both devotion and secrecy. Tom Cruise's relationship with Scientology began in the mid-1980s, when he was introduced to the Church by actress Mimi Rogers, then his girlfriend. Over the ensuing decades, Cruise became one of the most prominent adherents, his devotion cemented through a close and personal bond with David Miscavige, the Church's leader. Their connection reportedly included activities like tennis, skydiving, and private meetings, reinforcing both trust and mutual influence. Cruise's standing in the Church brought him tangible advantages: protection from scrutiny, a high-status role among celebrity members, and direct access to decision-makers within Scientology's global network. His fame amplified the Church's visibility, allowing him to shape public perception of Scientology while benefiting from the organization's support in career and personal matters. Yet, the advantages carried immense pressures, particularly within Cruise's personal life and marriage. Scientology's culture emphasizes loyalty, transparency, and compliance, and insiders have described the monitoring of Cruise's spouse, Katie Holmes, as relentless. Even Cruise's family members, including his sisters, were said to be more cautious of Miscavige than of Cruise himself. This pervasive oversight reportedly created a climate where Holmes's decisions were heavily scrutinized, her autonomy constrained by both her husband's devotion and the organization's influence. The pressure was not subtle. It extended to daily life, career moves, and parenting decisions, illustrating how deeply embedded the Church's reach could be into the personal lives of its most prominent members. Advanced Scientology beliefs, including the Xenu narrative and references to cosmic or messianic figures, intersected with Cruise's public image in ways that heightened scrutiny and speculation. Media coverage often juxtaposed Cruise's spiritual devotion with his dramatic public behavior. His infamous 2005 couch-jumping episode on The Oprah Winfrey Show, for instance, was interpreted by some observers as a visible manifestation of his larger-than-life commitment, both to Holmes and to Scientology. Cruise's prominence and the extraordinary doctrines he embraced illuminate the dual nature of Scientology for its celebrity members. The church offered protection, influence, and spiritual purpose, yet demanded rigorous devotion and placed enormous pressures on private life. Holmes, as his spouse, was drawn into this orbit, experiencing firsthand the layers of monitoring, expectation, and organizational authority. Reports indicate that the pressures intensified during their marriage, shaping everything from public appearances to personal decisions. The religion operates on multiple levels. Outwardly, a system of self-improvement and success, and inwardly, a hierarchy of secret teachings, mythic narratives, and strict behavioral codes. For Tom Cruise, these elements offered extraordinary advantages, enabling him to consolidate influence and prestige. For those in close proximity, the rewards came with constraints. The secret exit, planning the divorce. By mid-June 2012, Katie Holmes was ready to execute one of the most calculated exits in Hollywood history. While on a trip to China, far from the prying eyes of the media and the relentless scrutiny of Scientology insiders, she began quietly coordinating her departure. To avoid any chance of surveillance, Holmes relied on multiple burner phones, rotating them frequently to contact lawyers across different states. Each call, carefully timed and routed, allowed her to seek legal advice and strategize her next moves without leaving a trace. This was not a spontaneous decision. It was the culmination of years of observing the inner workings of Scientology and understanding the limitations it imposed on her autonomy. Holmes's strategy was informed by precedent. She reached out to Nicole Kidman, Cruise's ex-wife, who had gone through her own high-profile divorce in 2001. Kidman had experienced firsthand the difficulties of separating from Cruise under the shadow of the church, including losing contact with her adopted children. Their conversations were practical and cautionary. Kidman advised Holmes to move slowly, protect her daughter, and anticipate the ways the organization might try to intervene. These private exchanges helped Holmes refine her plan. A critical step in her preparation involved her business affairs. Isabella Cruz, Tom's adopted daughter, with Nicole Kidman, had been working closely with Holmes's fashion label. Isabella's position within the company represented a direct line to Scientology, as she maintained ties with the church and her father. Holmes made a decisive move. She removed Isabella from the company abruptly. No warning was given, and colleagues were shocked, but the action was necessary. By cutting this link, Holmes insulated her business and personal affairs from the church's influence, ensuring that the organization could not monitor or interfere with her legal strategy or financial decisions. When it came time to file for divorce,
how big a deal it was when Tom divorced his second wife, Nicole Kidman.
Holmes made another strategic choice. She filed in New York rather than California. You see, California courts tend to favor joint custody in contested cases, potentially limiting a parent's autonomy, whereas New York judges are more willing to grant sole custody when evidence suggests it is in the child's best interest. Holmes sought sole custody of Suri, knowing that New York's system would offer a more favorable legal environment. Additionally, New York allowed her to file under an anonymous case name, shielding the proceedings from public scrutiny. In California, the case would have been automatically public, inviting intense media attention and potentially jeopardizing her safety and privacy. Holmes even rented a Manhattan apartment in advance, ostensibly for privacy, but in reality as a base from which she could quietly prepare the legal and logistical aspects of her divorce. The divorce itself unfolded with remarkable speed. Within 11 days of filing, all major terms were agreed upon. Child support was set at $400,000 per year, covering Suri's medical care, tuition, and extracurricular activities. A trust fund was also established, granting Suri partial access at age 18 and full control in her 30s. Holmes did not receive spousal support from Cruise's estimated $250 million fortune. The impact of Scientology on the marriage and divorce became a matter of public record in 2013. On September 9th, Cruise gave a deposition in a lawsuit against Bauer Publishing over a $50 million defamation claim, during which he was asked if Holmes had left to protect their daughter from the church. Cruise confirmed that Scientology had played a role in the divorce, acknowledging, "Yes, that was one of the assertions," and stated that Suri was no longer practicing the religion. He also confirmed that his older children with Nicole Kidman had severed ties with Holmes completely. This rare public acknowledgement provided concrete evidence of the church's influence over the couple's private life and confirmed many of the suspicions that had circulated since Holmes's departure. Holmes's ability to assert control over her life extended beyond the divorce. In March 2011, she had filed a $50 million lawsuit against Star magazine, whose May 2011 cover implied she was a substance addict with the headline, "Addiction Nightmare, Katie Substance Shocker," accompanied by an unflattering photograph. The legal action argued that the cover damaged her reputation, and it was settled on April 27, 2011. As part of the settlement, Star magazine published a front-page apology on May 9, 2011, stating that they did not intend to suggest Holmes was a substance addict or undergoing addiction treatment. The publisher, American Media Inc., also donated to Holmes's chosen charity, the Dizzy Feet Foundation, which supports dance education for underprivileged children. The lawsuit was emblematic of Holmes's meticulous approach to managing both her public image and her personal autonomy, demonstrating a strategic mind attuned to the power of perception in Hollywood. But the horrors don't end here. The shadow of Scientology. For years, former insiders have described the environment Katie Holmes faced as one of intense scrutiny, where personal autonomy was tightly constrained and every move was monitored. The church's influence on Cruise meant that Holmes's life, and by extension her daughter Suri's, was under constant observation, a situation that former members likened to living under a modern-day Stasi. The broader public came to appreciate the scale of this oversight only through the accounts of former Scientologists who had chosen to speak out. Leah Remini, best known for her role as Carrie Heffernan on the long-running sitcom The King of Queens, spent nearly 30 years inside the Church of Scientology before making the dramatic decision to leave in 2013. Born in Brooklyn, New York, in 1970, Remini was introduced to Scientology as a child when her mother joined the organization. She spent decades deeply embedded in its culture, rising through the ranks as both a devoted member and one of the church's most recognizable celebrity faces. Her departure in July 2013 marked a significant rupture with the institution she had been part of since adolescence and triggered a series of public statements, interviews, and investigations in which she described the inner workings of Scientology in stark detail. Following her exit, Remini became one of the most prominent critics of the church, using her platform to speak openly about what she described as coercive practices and psychological pressure within the organization. She later documented many of these experiences in her 2015 memoir, Troublemaker: Surviving Hollywood and Scientology, and in the Emmy-winning documentary series Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath, which premiered in 2016. In these projects, Remini interviewed former members who described similar experiences of isolation, internal discipline, and pressure to cut off contact with critics or family members who left the church. Because of that background, Remini's reaction to Katie Holmes's 2012 departure from Scientology carried particular weight. On November 3, 2015, Remini appeared on Good Morning America and spoke candidly about Holmes's decision to leave both the church and her marriage to Tom Cruise. During the interview, Remini became visibly emotional while discussing the situation. She explained that watching Holmes and her daughter, Suri, living outside Scientology moved her deeply because she understood the complexity and risk involved in making such a break. Remini emphasized that leaving the organization is rarely simple. In her account, the church's internal culture strongly discourages members from questioning leadership or departing, and those who do leave can face social consequences such as disconnection, a practice in which active members are expected to sever ties with individuals labeled as suppressive or hostile to Scientology. Remini stated that the environment she experienced inside the church was often intensely controlled, describing it as mentally stressful and, in some cases, she witnessed or heard about, physically intimidating. By the time Remini spoke on Good Morning America, Holmes had already spent several years living primarily in New York City with Suri, working on film projects, stage performances, and fashion ventures while maintaining a relatively private personal life. Similarly, Jenna Miscavige Hill, the niece of longtime Scientology leader David Miscavige, also publicly supported Katie Holmes after her 2012 departure from Tom Cruise and the Church of Scientology. Hill's voice carried particular weight because she had grown up inside the organization's highest levels and had first-hand experience with the church's internal hierarchy and disciplinary systems. Born in 1984, Hill spent much of her childhood within Scientology compounds, including the church's secretive international headquarters known as the Gold Base in Gilman Hot Springs, California. As a teenager, she joined the church's elite inner workforce, the Sea Organization, often called the Sea Org, whose members sign a symbolic billion-year contract and devote their lives to advancing Scientology's mission. Hill left Scientology in 2005 at the age of 21, after years inside that environment. In 2013, she published a memoir titled Beyond Belief: My Secret Life Inside Scientology and My Harrowing Escape, which detailed what she described as strict discipline, long work hours, and the emotional strain placed on members who questioned leadership. In interviews following Holmes's divorce, Hill spoke openly about why Holmes's exit stood out. Writing for the Daily Beast shortly after the divorce became public in June 2012, Hill described Holmes's move as both strategic and courageous, noting how rare it was for someone so closely connected to Scientology's most famous member to leave so decisively. Hill explained that the church maintains influence through a network of policies and expectations that encourage loyalty and discourage dissent. One of the most controversial practices she described was disconnection, a policy under which members may be instructed to cut off contact with people labeled suppressive persons, including family members who criticize Scientology or leave the church. When Holmes filed for divorce from Tom Cruise on June 28, 2012, in New York, Hill wrote that the move demonstrated a level of planning rarely seen in cases involving Scientology's inner circle. Katie's actions were remarkable, Hill explained in one interview, emphasizing how quickly Holmes moved to secure custody of her daughter, Suri. Hill also highlighted the personal risks involved. In her public comments, she pointed out that many former Scientologists lose contact with friends and family after leaving the church. Holmes, by contrast, managed to separate from Cruise, retain custody of Suri, and rebuild her life largely outside the organization's influence. Hill said that, from the perspective of former members, that outcome was extraordinary. Holmes's departure also highlighted the broader culture of secrecy and fear within Scientology, a system that thrives on controlling information and leveraging influence over high-profile members. The church's monitoring, strict hierarchy, and carefully managed public image are designed to maintain compliance and loyalty. This creates an environment where even small actions can carry immense weight. In retrospect, Holmes's successful extrication is seen as rare, almost unprecedented. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, Don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.